During this video presentation, I'll be talking through arousal, anxiety, and stress in sport. So firstly, I'm just going to give a quick overview on arousal. So arousal is defined by Adams et al. As a state of alertness and anticipation that prepares the body for action. It can vary along a continuum, deep sleep as one extreme and intense excitement at the other. Arousal affects both the physical and mental state of the body, otherwise known as somatic and cognitive arousal. Somatic being changes in the physical state of the body and cognitive being psychological changes. A change in somatic arousal could lead to physiological changes like heart rate, breathing rate and body temperature increasing. Additionally, cognitive arousal increasing could lead to things like attention levels increasing. However, if you are under-aroused, it could lead to negative thought or worry. Different sporting performers will require different levels of arousal depending on the sport they do. For example, a rugby player will need a pretty high arousal level to enable themselves to be really fired up and to commit to every tackle with conviction. On the other hand, an archer won't need as high arousal levels due to them needing to feel calm and composed. In terms of the relationship between arousal and sporting performance, there are three theories, each one of the theories giving a contrasting view on the relationship that arousal and performance have. These theories are the drive theory, the inverted U theory, and the catastrophe theory. The first theory of arousal that I'm going to look into is the drive theory. So the drive theory states that the relationship that arousal and performance have is linear. In other words, as a performer's arousal level increases, so does their performance. Moreover, it states that the more learned a certain sporting skill is, for example, kick-ups or keepy-uppies in football, the more likely that there will be a higher performance when the performer has experienced higher levels of arousal. So if we look into a football player doing kick-ups in relation to the drive theory, this is what we should expect to see. So let's say the footballer already has quite a high level and is quite comfortable doing kick-ups. The theory says that if the player becomes more aroused, they should be able to do more kick-ups in a row, and there is less chance of them making a mistake compared to when they're in a lower state of arousal. So when in a state of low arousal, the theory states that Ronaldo could do 35 in a row, but if he becomes more aroused, the theory says that he should be able to do 55, let's say, without making a mistake. So this is what the drive theory suggests. However, there is one quite significant criticism with the drive theory. This is that it doesn't explain the reasoning for why an athlete might fail when in a high arousal situation. So if Ronaldo is in his optimum arousal level, he's feeling really energized, but he only does 15 keepy-uppies before making a mistake. Why is this? So the drive theory obviously doesn't give any reasoning for this. However, the second theory of arousal, which is the inverted U theory, does put an argument forward as to why athletes might make an error when in a situation of high arousal. So the inverted U theory states that at optimum arousal, performance will be at its highest level, which is obviously the same as the drive theory. However, the inverted U theory goes on to say that if arousal becomes too high, in other words, a performer becomes overly aroused, then performance will drop. Also, the theory states that being under-aroused, which involves you obviously having a lower arousal level, this will cause a lower level of performance. So being under-aroused can lead to low concentration levels when performing, a lack of intensity, and also a lack of admiration to achieve. On the other hand, when you are over-aroused, it can lead to your field of attention narrowing, and your concentration may become focused on one particular thing. So for example, if a defender in football gets completely outskilled by an opposing attacker, and that attacker goes on to score, for the rest of the game, that defender might become too focused on ensuring they don't get turned again, or to make sure that attacker doesn't get around them. So therefore, their field of attention will be on ensuring they tackle that specific attacker. But this could lead to them moving out of position by committing to tackling, which could open up a gap in the defence for another attacker to move into and receive the ball. Consequently, because of this, because of a performer becoming overly aroused, it can lead to them making rash decisions from their attention narrowing. This can also be described as becoming hypervigilant, which is losing the ability to focus. Therefore, when a performer reaches this state of over-arousal, a theory states that performance will gradually begin to drop. This is clearly backed up by the graph on the screen, which shows a drop in a line when over-arousal is reached, which is signifying the drop in performance. Finally, an important thing to note is that optimal perfect level of arousal varies for different sporting skills. So, for example, fine movements involving accuracy require a low optimal level of arousal, whereas gross skills that might require power, strength, and large muscle groups require a higher level of optimal arousal. So finally, one slight criticism of the inverted U theory. So it signifies, by looking at the graph, that when a performer becomes overly aroused, it suggests that this decrease in performance and arousal is kind of a slow continuum, whereas I would say that it's quite a sharp drop. So I would expect to see the line to drop down a lot sharper instead of this kind of curve gradually dropping down, which we will be able to see in the catastrophe theory coming up. So the third and final theory of the arousal is the catastrophe theory. The catastrophe theory follows the same structure of the inverted U theory, as in it suggests that as arousal increases, so does performance. However, the catastrophe theory states that when an athlete is experiencing high levels of cognitive anxiety and arousal increases beyond the threshold, the athletes will experience a dramatic decrease in performance. So obviously different to inverted U theory, where it's kind of a slow gradual. Here you can obviously see this dramatic decrease in performance, where this is clearly shown by the line on the graph dropping straight down when optimal arousal is reached. So on the contrary to the inverted U theory, the catastrophe theory suggests that there can be a regain in arousal and therefore also performance. Or similar to the inverted U theory, the catastrophe theory says that after the extreme decline in arousal and performance, it can carry on decreasing instead of being regained. So this part of the theory is shown on the section of the graph where it splits two ways. A sporting situation that could link to the catastrophe theory is when a tennis player is serving to stay in the set at 5-6 down in the first set tiebreak. So at this moment, the player's arousal level and also anxiety level will be quite high due to the importance of the point ahead. So let's say the player goes on to double fault, which loses the set for them. At this moment, cognitive anxiety will rise and arousal will move over the threshold. This will consequently cause performance to drop quite drastically. At the start of the second set, the player could start off quite badly due to being overly aroused and not being fully focused. However, the catastrophe theory states that it is possible for arousal to be regained for the player in the second set, or it also suggests that performance could still begin to drop, and the player's performance to continue to decline as a result. So now we're going to move on to anxiety in sport. So anxiety, as defined by Adams et al., is a negative emotional state that is characterized by feeling of nervousness, apprehension or worry. Some examples that could cause competitive anxiety to occur are the fear of failure, making mistakes, fear of being judged by the crowd, your coach or your teammates, fear of the importance of the competition, for example playing in a final, and finally it could be the fear of injury or danger. Similar to arousal, you can experience cognitive or somatic anxiety. So cognitive anxiety refers to the negative thoughts that go on inside a performer's head, which can lead to concentration issues, general fear, and consequently poor decision making. Somatic anxiety refers to the psychological changes of the body due to that physiological change of the body due to that feeling of anxiety. Things like heart rate, breathing rate, and also sweating may occur. Cognitive anxiety usually occurs hours before competition, whereas somatic anxiety usually occurs moments before performance starts. However, you can experience cognitive and somatic anxiety during the performance, which can lead to a catastrophe. So going back to the catastrophe theory just now, when you experience cognitive and somatic anxiety, this can lead to this catastrophe and therefore becoming overly aroused. So for example, if a netball player has experienced cognitive anxiety and somatic anxiety when about to take what should be a really straightforward shot at the net, it could lead to them completely misjudging the weight of the shot and consequently missing. This particular sporting example can be linked to the catastrophe theory, because once this netball player misses their shot due to feeling too much cognitive and somatic anxiety, they would most likely move over their arousal threshold. So another example to link to cognitive and somatic anxiety to the catastrophe theory, I have presented on the screen. So when Djokovic is serving at set point down, it is most likely that he is feeling a mixture of cognitive and somatic anxiety. Because of this mixture of cognitive and somatic, a catastrophe theory occurs, which is him double faulting and consequently losing the set. Additionally, his arousal levels may shoot up over his threshold, causing him to feel really angry and smashing his racket. Moreover, as well as cognitive and somatic anxiety, there is also trait and state anxiety. So trait anxiety is an aspect of a personality and part of an individual's pattern of behaviour. Someone with trait anxiety is likely to find a variety of different situations worrying and stressful for them. These could be situations that most people don't perceive to be threatening at all. On the other hand, state anxiety is a temporary feeling of anxiety that will only arise in certain situations for individuals. So these can be completely different for different people. So for example, a football player might feel fine in terms of anxiety throughout the whole match, but when it comes to stepping up to take a penalty in the 90th minute to win the match, their anxiety levels could start to rise quite dramatically. So this is obviously an example of state anxiety because it happens at a particular situation. When taking this penalty, cognitive anxiety will start to kick in as well, so worry about missing the penalty, and also heart rate will probably be racing due to feeling so anxious and nervous, and this obviously being a part of somatic anxiety. Someone with trait anxiety can really struggle in sport in all situations due to potentially feeling really nervous not only before the game but during the game, and this could obviously lead to poor decision making and constant mistakes throughout performance. So we're now going to go on to talking about managing anxiety. So experiencing anxiety before or during a match or competition is not ideal, as it can lead to a significant decrease in performance. Unfortunately, we can't help feeling anxious or nervous, and it is not something that is easy to get rid of. However, there are a few techniques that are commonly used by performers at all levels to help manage the feeling of anxiety. Some examples of these are deep breathing, positive self-talk, focusing attention on the relevant cues, and also focusing on your own personal strengths and skills. Deep breathing is a somatic technique which very simply involves the performer exaggerating their breaths in and out. The top half of the body should remain relaxed, and slow deep breaths should be used to allow the performer to control their anxiety and focus on the task in hand. Moreover, taking deep breaths can help to slowing down the heart rate, which is a really common example of somatic anxiety. The reason why it can help slow down the heart is because you'll be increasing the volume of oxygen entering the lungs, meaning that the heart doesn't need to work as hard to pump oxygen to the muscles and other areas of the body where it's needed. This particular technique can be used before performance to calm nerves and control anxiety, but it can also be used during performance as well to help to focus the mind on the task in hand. It is commonly used as a way of helping the body to feel more relaxed. For example, you might see a